It is now my pleasure to be able to introduce Ovetta Wiggins. Ovetta is no stranger to all of us in the room. Ovetta covers Maryland state politics in Annapolis for the Washington Post, where she started in 2003. She graduated from Rutgers University and previously worked at the Philadelphia Inquirer and the Bergen Record in New Jersey. Not needing any additional introduction, we are honored to have Ovetta today as our moderator, so let's get started.
I first want to thank the committee for Montgomery for inviting me on today for their annual legislative breakfast, and I thank all of you for being here today to hear from our candidates for the 2022 gubernatorial race. Today we have 9 candidates, 7 of the Democratic candidates, 1 of the 3 Republican candidates, and 1 candidate representing the Libertarian Party. They are, and I'll do this in alphabetical order, former Prince George's County Executive Rushern Baker, former nonprofit executive Jon Barron, former delegate Robin Ficker, former Maryland Attorney General Doug Gansler, former Obama administration official and former Montgomery County Council candidate Ashwani Jain, IT executive David Lashar, former U.S. Education Secretary John King, author and former nonprofit executive Wes Moore, and lastly, former U.S. Labor Secretary and former head of the DNC, Tom Perez. I'll just quickly go over the rules. Each candidate will have 60 seconds for an opening statement. There will be no closing statement. Each will then have 90 seconds to answer questions on the 4 areas of focus of the committee. They are transportation, education, economic development, and the state surplus. We plan to hold each of you to the time allotted so that everyone has a chance to answer the questions. But I also want to note that because there's such a crowded field and there is limited time, every candidate will not be asked the same question. So let's get started. And we'll start with Rushern Baker for his opening statement.
Okay. Thank you. I want to thank the committee for Montgomery for having us this morning. Good to be back. I'm glad to be in here because I'm in here with my running mate, Nancy Navarro, who's a council member. I think she's out there. Nancy, can you stand up? And I will say in my time that the reason I partner with Nancy is we both worked on critical issues that we are facing in the state and in the county, whether it is health care, minimum wage, which we raised in Prince George's County, Montgomery County, leading the way, or whether it's around public safety, inclusion, and those are the things that we worked on individually in our counties, but we want to work on across the state. I think what will help Montgomery County is the fact that we understand local government, that we come from 2 of the largest counties in the state and have actually run local government and faced the things that, that we see that goes on today. So in my time, I look forward to answering questions here and getting to know you better. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Jon Barron. I'm a former nonprofit executive. Before that, I headed roughly $1 billion technology program in the Clinton administration. I've been an appointee of Democratic and Republican presidents and twice confirmed by the Senate. I've gotten major legislation enacted into federal law that has benefited Maryland and many other states. The reason I'm running for governor is because Maryland can do so much better in education, wages, and health care, and I'm the one to get us there. Because unlike others, I would expand programs and policies that don't just sound like good ideas, but have been tested in the real world and shown to make a big difference in people's lives. I'll give you one example. We will expand, when I'm governor, we will expand high-quality tutoring to every struggling first and second grader in the entire state of Maryland, because it's been shown to move them up toward grade level early before their problems become serious in later grades. We're going to do it by engaging the community, including retirees and recent college graduates, to become tutors for a modest stipend as a public service. That's just one example. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Doug Gansler. I know many of you here. I've been coming to this breakfast for over 25 years. I've been working with many of you during the 23 years that I served in government. I'm actually from Montgomery County. My favorite thing to do would, when I was at Chevy Chase Elementary School, would be to go to Lowen's to the toy store and then to Gifford's Ice Cream afterward. I understand Montgomery County. We've never had a governor elected from Montgomery County. It's going to be even more critical right now because we're losing the comptroller, the attorney general, and our wonderful treasurer, Nancy Kopp, who is here as well. And so we're going to be disproportionately underrepresented in Annapolis. And that's important because people in Annapolis often view our county as the ATM for the rest of the state. We need to make sure we support our businesses, our big businesses, our small businesses, and the people who work at those businesses. And the reason why it's really important, I'll give you an example, is during COVID, during this crisis that we're in now, when we wanted to have a vaccination center here in Montgomery County in early February, we got ours it had to go to Baltimore, and we finally got it here in the end of April. So I look forward to your questions, and thank you for listening to us today.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the opportunity. My name is Ashwani Jain. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a 32-year-old cancer survivor who's the son of immigrants, a proud product of Maryland Public Schools. I've worked in the public, private, and nonprofit sectors, and I had the opportunity to serve in the Obama White House and 2 federal agencies. I am running for governor to make our politics more inclusive and accessible. We already have built one of the largest grassroots campaigns in the state. I'm the first statewide candidate in the nation to be 100% volunteer run and limit the influence of money by making all my events free. And since January, I've shared over 150 detailed policies on my website. All were created by residents impacted by those policies, including my fully paid for Maryland Now plan, which will eliminate your state income tax, free public transit, guarantee jobs, legalize marijuana and expunge records, and impose anti-corruption measures. Full details are at janeforgovernor.com. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm grateful to the committee for the opportunity to be a part of today's discussion. My name's John King. I'm running for governor really for the same reason I became a teacher at the start of my career. When I was a kid growing up, both my parents passed away, my mom when I was 8 and my dad when I was 12. And the thing that saved me was public schools. Public institutions that intervened in my life at the critical moment. And that's what I believe government should be, a force for good in people's lives. I believe government should be a force for good in people's lives by providing an excellent education to every student in Maryland. That's what I worked on as a teacher, principal, Secretary of Education for President Obama. I believe government can be a force for good by ensuring good economic development in the state and also economic dignity. Issues like paid family leave, investing in public transportation, housing that folks can afford. And government can be a force for good tackling what is an existential threat in climate change. So I'm pleased to be here and a part of this conversation. Thank you.
Good morning, and it's great to be with you. My name is Wes Moore, and I just want to first just start by just thanking the hotel staff and everyone who's putting all of this together today, who've done a remarkable job. I was born near here by Tacoma Park, and this is the state where I came of age. It's the state where I fell in love. It's the state where we're raising our children. And the beauty of this room is this is what change looks like, and this is how it happens. I've had the chance to run and lead a successful small business here in the state of Maryland. I've had a chance to lead one of the largest nonprofit organizations in this country. And I know that in order for change to be real, it needs to be collaborative. That's how I've always led, and that's how I plan on leading as the governor. And so the momentum of our campaign is real. I'm thankful for the fact we received the endorsements just this week of Senator Obie Patterson in Prince George's, of people like Senator Dolores Kelly in Baltimore County. And just yesterday, I was pleased to announce that Aruna Miller, Montgomery County's own, is going to serve as my running mate. And I'm thankful for the chance to be with you this morning. Thank you so much.
Perez, and it's an honor to be here with you today. Congratulations, Council President Albornoz, Council Vice President Glass, on your ascension this week, and I'm honored to have your support in this race for governor. I'm Tom Perez. I'm a member of the GSD wing of the Democratic Party. I want to get stuff done. In different audiences, I use a different S word, but we're here in the morning, so I'm going to stick with that S word. You know, the next governor is going to have two things: meaningful partnership. Meaningful partnership on education, meaningful partnership on transportation, meaningful partnership on housing. You know what? If we have this world-class education system, and I'm a proud MCPS parent, but our kids can't afford to buy a house in this county, we will have failed. Meaningful partnership on health care, and I've been proud to partner with Holy Cross when I was on the council to make sure that immigrant women had access to health care. Meaningful partnership is how we get stuff done in this state, and that's what I want to do, is be your meaningful partner. Thank you so much.
Hello, everybody. I'm David Lashar, and I am your libertarian alternative to the big party candidates for Maryland governor in 2022. I live in Annapolis with my wife, who works in environmental protection, and our teenage daughter. I am, as you heard, an IT executive. So what I do is I work with organizations to help them understand what IT can do for them, and then to use the IT so that they can become better at whatsoever they might do. I am, in addition to that, experienced and accomplished in both the legislative branch and the executive branch at both the federal and the state levels of government. So between those experiences and my IT business, I submit that I bring a depth and breadth of experience to the job of governor that none of the other candidates would bring to the office. Why am I running? I'm running because I believe that we need more voices, more choices, and I look forward to the coming months of the campaign and the questions forthcoming this morning. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Robin Ficker, who's lived his whole life in Montgomery County. No Montgomery County resident has ever been elected governor of Maryland. I've put more than 20 questions on the ballot in Montgomery County, which have received 2,537,403 votes. We got term limits through with 300,000 votes. We got a property tax limit through with 200,000 votes, which required a unanimous vote of the council. The Washington Post has opposed all 21 of my questions, which were trying to bring about peaceful change. Their peaceful change is defining a 30% increase in the real estate transfer tax and a 9% property tax increase as examples of budgetary restraint. I disagree. I'm the only candidate who's been meeting the average Marylander, having spent the last 2 summers on the boardwalk in Ocean City.
We're going to ask you to wrap it up.
Where I can meet people from all 23 counties. They all want to use Montgomery County as an ATM. I will not let it happen.
Thank you. We'll start with our first question, and this question will be for the first 5 candidates that are on the stage. It is about transportation. What is your position on A, whether the Capitol Beltway and I-270 should be widened with high occupancy toll lanes, and 2, whether the state's current plan to do so via a 50-year public-private partnership? Mr. Baker.
Well, first of all, I'm for making sure that we can actually get people off the highways and investing in public transportation. But I am not for toll lanes. And the reason I'm not for toll lanes here is because a couple of years ago when Ike Leggett and I decided to support the increase in the gas tax, the idea was that you wouldn't have to do toll lanes, that we could actually take care of our transportation issues with the revenues that were raised. And the reason we can't do that now is because the current governor used that money. And so what we should be focusing on is not the toll lanes, but making sure we provide the type of transportation that is needed in not only in Montgomery County, in our western part of our state up here, on the way down. So I would look at working with the county executive, working with the county council, and figuring out the best way to go forward, but not a toll lane.
So I'm a strong proponent of mass transit. I've ridden the bus myself to work for 25 years. I strongly support the Purple Line, an east-west solution in Baltimore, and so on. I do support in the partial expansion, both in 270, the southern part of 270, and the part of the Beltway between 270 and the American Legion Bridge, because we need a balance. We need, while we want to promote mass transit and all of that, it's not good for the economy, it's not good for the quality of life. The estimates show it would reduce traffic by about 10 to 20% during peak hours, traffic congestion, so I do support it, but not the full thing. The partial expansion, we should see where we are at that point, what's happened to traffic patterns, and then decide whether we should do the full expansion that's been proposed. So, so that's my position on the matter.
In terms of the phase one component of this, which is the American Legion Bridge around the Beltway up 270, I do not favor it in terms of having taxpayers pay for that. We all have sat on, me more than others here, have sat on 270 our whole lives, watched the traffic sitting there and being very frustrated. So the fact of the matter is it's being done, and the question is it being done in a responsible, effective way? As somebody who's been in government for 23 years, has led government agencies, statewide government agencies, I understand the need for efficient, effective, and fair procurement practices. And so right now there's a bid protest going on regarding that. We'll see where that goes. But I don't want to be the person driving on the American Legion Bridge when it falls. And I also don't want to be the person that's pretending it's not, that it's a choice between traffic or mass transit. We can have both. It's a false choice. We need to make sure that we don't just move the bottleneck up north on 270, that we connect Shady Grove up to Frederick, whether it's light rail, monorail, or another means of rapid transit buses, electric buses. But we also need to use the ICC, which also has been built. And we need to have a commuter reduction in fare. If you use the ICC multiple times a month, you should pay less, and we get more people off the Beltway and onto the ICC. We need to support our metro system. And it's falling apart. We're out of money, and we need to make sure we have mass transit there. And finally, the Purple Line. To watch the way government has done that is difficult to see, particularly here in Montgomery County.
Thank you.
So more roads have not proven to reduce traffic. I oppose toll lanes. I would also make sure we have more accountability and transparency with any contracts that we have. We also have to look at infrastructure transportation in a comprehensive way. That means having more smart growth, mixed-use development, not just single-family housing, but multifamily housing as well. Obviously the Purple Line, obviously the Red Line, obviously the Southern Maryland Rapid Transit Project, more designated BRT, bus lanes, all throughout the state, making sure we're expanding MART train services. And the final piece is including residents in the decision-making process before, during, and after any decision is made.
Thank you.
Look, I think the challenge we have is that Governor Hogan and Comptroller Francho are committed to the transportation policies of the 1950s. and they don't work. And so we need to move to a different strategy that relies on public transportation. We should not pursue the toll road project. The American Legion Bridge portion of the project, that's worth doing. We can use federal infrastructure funds to make sure that that happens. But the toll lane expansion is a mistake. It will actually make traffic worse. I think there are alternatives like reversible lanes that may be able to help us address some of the traffic. But ultimately, we need to focus on public transportation. I agree with others. We need to build the Red Line project in Baltimore City. We need to work to finish the Purple Line. We need to work on the Southern Maryland Light Rail project. We need to invest in reliable bus service. You talk to folks around the world, they think of the bus as a reliable form of transportation. When you talk to folks around Maryland, people look down at the ground when you mention the bus because they worry that it will be late. They worry that they're going to be standing in the rain waiting for the bus. We have to commit to a modern public transportation system. We also have to work to make our neighborhoods more walkable with walking trails, with bike lanes that are protected. We can build a transportation system that's people-focused rather than car-focused.
Our next question is about the surplus, and we'll start with Mr. Moore. State economic forecasters initially thought that the pandemic would lead to massive shortfalls in the state budget. Instead, we're looking at a surplus of more than $2 billion. How would your administration handle this money? How much would you keep in the rainy day fund, and what are your 3 top priorities, specific programs for spending the money?
Thank you. Yeah, we need to make sure that we're filling up our rainy day fund, but we also have to understand that for many people in the state, it is pouring right now. And it means we need to invest in the things that have been long-term needs for the people of our state, but we have neglected. There is a way that we can actually leverage this capital in new and unique ways because we have a new balance sheet that we want to make sure that we're involving the private sector inside of this process, where how do we take the fact that we have a $2.5 billion surplus that is estimated in 2 years out amortized could be upwards of $4 to $5 billion, and to say, how are we going to invest in our mass transit options that are things that are able to move people from where they live to where they work, because you could have the best job training programs, but if people can't get to the jobs, then what's the point? That we can also make sure we have 21st century schools and actually increasing the teacher experience so that our educators are being supported and that our children are not coming up in environments where, for example, we have parts of the state where children cannot drink from water fountains because of lead, where we can actually put together a long-term investment and leverage that capital that we can turn even the ARPA money that's coming in and turn that 3.7 into 9.4 because we're doing things like investment projects and investor projects with our private sector to be able to make sure that the long-term needs and the long-term investments for the people of Maryland are actually being done.
As someone who worked in local government here in the county council, the first thing I'd want to do is consult with county executives and county councils and mayors, because we have needs across the state, but there may be different needs in Montgomery County from Talbot County, from Garrett County. And so I want to make sure we listen so that we're doing the right thing. I know one thing we've seen across the state is teachers are struggling because of the pandemic. We need to invest some of this money to provide support for behavioral health, for teachers, for students, because they need our help right now. We can do so much. We have a nursing crisis right now, a nursing shortage. We need to work with our employers on this because we have a pandemic right now, and if we continue to have a health care shortage, we're going to exacerbate that pandemic. So we need to work on that as well. We need to help people who are at risk of eviction, help people who can buy that home, can pay for their home, but they can't afford the down payment. I think there's so much things like this that we can do. We can't commit things that are going to create long-term commitments, but we can pick up the pace of school construction. We have too many kids going to schools that are 90 degrees out, and you know what? You can't learn when it's 90 degrees. And this will give us an opportunity to pick up the pace of school construction. Things like this, these sorts of investments are enabling us to address this crisis that we're at now. That's what we can do. And I will listen first and then act collaboratively later.
So the rainy day fund, I think we should leave it overwhelmingly for the rainy day. From Washington, we're seeing rising inflation, we're seeing building debt, and I think that we need to be ready for some kind of financial event that could occur. But in addition to that, we've already got money coming from Washington. It's raining money from Washington, so there's no urgency for spending the surplus now. Set it aside and decide what we want to do with it. But I do want to share two priorities that I would have for that money. I do have some passion for east-west transit in Baltimore. I don't think the subway underneath the harbor is the right answer, but we do need an answer there. Another place that I would like to spend some of the surplus is on law enforcement. And the legislature, the assembly, in 2021, in the past session, they passed a number of really good bills for transparency and accountability in law enforcement. We need to follow through and achieve the objectives of those bills, and a large part of it is police training. Right? That's not real expensive, but I think it's real important. So we don't need to defund the police, but we do need to remake them. And that is one of the priorities towards which I would like to use the surplus. Thank you.
I'm Robin, running for governor, and the only candidate up here who wants to cut your taxes. I'm for cutting the state sales tax 2 cents, which amounts to a rebate of $780 per year per household. Plus, it gives our state a reputation of being business friendly. Right now, the big 4 corporations in the U.S., Amazon, Apple, Microsoft, and Google, they shun Maryland. I talked recently and met with Governor Ducey of Arizona and Governor Abbott of Texas. They just landed $17 billion, $30 billion plants to make semiconductors, which there's a worldwide shortage. We're producing 7 million fewer cars because we don't have the semiconductors. Why didn't the Maryland Department of Commerce get on that and get in the battle to win semiconductor plants? Also, car batteries. There's another issue. Texas just landed a huge plant from Samsung to construct car batteries. People will throw away their needles, they'll throw away the drugs, they'll throw away the guns if they can make $30 or $40 making semiconductors and car batteries. We need to make Maryland business friendly.
Thank you. This question will be actually for all of the candidates. The national dialogue has renewed focus on justice and systemic inequality. What do you view as the most pressing disparity in Maryland right now? And what steps would you take in your first 100 days in office to resolve it?
The most pressing disparity? Well, first of all, I mean, when we talk about social justice, one of the things I would do is what my running mate did. When we talked about equity and inclusion, the data around the county that Nancy Navarro led, and something that we did in County before, even before Ferguson, where we revamped our police department with implicit bias training way before these things happened. We looked at how we were actually employing around the county and the diversity within the county employment, not just at agency heads, but actually throughout. The most pressing needs that we have in the state right now around our education system. If COVID has done nothing else, it has shown us how the despair in our education system is. So folks who are already behind, children who were already behind, fell further behind because of COVID, either because they didn't have technology in their houses or didn't have the tutors to help them out. Those are the things that COVID has shown us. It's also shown us the disparity in healthcare. When we talk about, uninsured and underinsured throughout our state, we've seen that. These are issues that I faced every day as county executive in Prince George's County. These are the issues that Nancy Navarro has worked on here in Montgomery County. But we can also show the rest of the state how we do it right. because we were able in the county after 10 years to see a drop in underinsured and uninsured. We were able to actually see progress being made, and that's what I want to do as governor.
So in terms of the biggest problem, our biggest economic problem, also from an equity standpoint, is this, that the poverty rate in Maryland today is 9%. You know what it was in 1995? It was 9%. Because for low and moderate income Marylanders, they've seen stagnant wages for several decades while income inequality has been growing. The problem is that much worse. The poverty rate is 50% higher for Marylanders of color. So it's a problem. Generally, the system is not working for the bottom 40% of the population, and it hasn't been for decades. This is the biggest economic problem from an equity standpoint and from a social standpoint in our state. What I would do that is different from others to get us out of this rut is to expand programs that have been tested and shown to make a big difference for people who are low income, most of whom are people of color. I'll give you one example. My philanthropic team expanded this program to Silver Spring. It's since expanded to Baltimore. It's called Proscolis. But these are programs, we would launch basically a statewide partnership with businesses to expand effective job training to every young adult in the state of Maryland who wants to advance. If it's done right, like this program I just described, it can increase earnings as much as 40%.
I'm going to ask you to.
But the key is to work closely with businesses in designing that training and to focus that training on fast-growing industries. That could really make an enormous difference for people of color and for others.
Thank you. Ovetta, I think the question was about criminal justice, and I believe that, and the inequities in it, I believe that the number one function of government is to keep its people safe. And I've been in government for 23 years. I was an assistant United States attorney for 6 years under Eric Holder in Washington, D.C., 3.5 years in homicide, and prosecuted all kinds of other crimes. I was your state's attorney for 8 years. I was your attorney general for 8 years. I started on criminal justice reform back in 1989 when I was the head of the NAACP Criminal Justice Committee here in Montgomery County. We started working on diversity issues in our office. We have some of our diverse former prosecutors here in the room. When I became state's attorney, we had the first in the nation community prosecution full office where we started to build a trust between law enforcement and the communities that they serve. We put every police shooting, every single time a police shot an officer, a police shot a citizen, we put that in the grand jury and let folks from the community decide whether that was a justified shooting. We started the Family Justice Center here in Montgomery County. We'll have one in every area of the state. I started the first domestic violence dockets here in Maryland, and we'll have every one of the 24 jurisdictions in Maryland will have a domestic violence docket, or they won't get funded by the state. We started drug courts to keep people out of jail. We put way too many people in jail, so we had drug courts to give them incentive to stay out. So going forward, we're going to have the rest of the states can be like Montgomery County, where you need to have 2 years of education before you become an officer. Giving a gun to an 18-year-old and saying, have at it, good luck to you is not a great idea. And I have a lot more to say on our website. Thanks.
So I think inequities at all levels and all parts of our society have only increased, especially with COVID. And that's why I've tried to address issues in a very comprehensive way. Full details are at janeforgovernor.com. But one part of that is my criminal justice platform. And I don't think it's radical to demand accountability when black and brown people and low-income folks are being murdered by public servants. And I think we can work together in all these aspects to make sure people feel safer, and we're actually addressing the root causes of the problems. That's why I talk about ending extreme sentences for children, ending the money bail system, ending for-profit prison contracts in the future, making sure we're treating drug and opioid use as a disease and not as a crime, legalizing marijuana while expunging records, making sure we have a guaranteed jobs program, and making sure more people have disposable income. We're investing in our public schools, and also making sure that we are preparing those who are in prison, in incarceration, for life outside of prison. But again, it's about looking at issues in a very sincere and comprehensive way, and including those residents of the community that are impacted by all of these decisions into the process. And that's why on my campaign, I'm not waiting until the election to do that. We've already engaged residents from every single county, demographic, and age group to make these policy and strategy decisions from day one of my operation.
You know, I live in Silver Spring, about 25 miles from where my great-grandfather was enslaved in Gaithersburg, Maryland. And I'm deeply conscious of the reality that so many of our challenges today across all of our systems are in part a reflection of that history, the history of slavery, of segregation, of redlining. And to grapple with that challenge, I don't think there are any silver bullets. We have to look at racial justice and racial equity in every decision that we make. Just as we have a fiscal impact statement for every bill that the General Assembly considers, I think we should have a racial equity impact statement for every bill. That's right. And that will help us to understand how every change in housing policy and transportation policy and criminal justice policy and healthcare policy will affect the very real racial disparities that we all live with. That said, I want to take a moment to just focus on criminal justice. We have an African-American population in the state that's about 32%, 32% of our state's population. 70% of our prison population is African-American. That's immoral and unacceptable. And so we need as a state to reimagine public safety. We have to think very differently about how we approach ensuring public safety. We have to think about how we invest not only in policing, but also in mental health services and addiction treatment and violence prevention and summer jobs programs and all the things that are necessary to change that deeply troubling reality.
I think it's important to recognize that when we're looking at the disparities within the criminal justice system, that's just one way that disparities show themselves. That the criminal justice system is both a cause and a consequence, and the fact that in the state of Maryland that we incarcerate more young black boys from the ages of 18 and 25 per capita than any other state in this country. Second is Mississippi. And we have to address these realities. But we also have to remember that the type of disparities that we also need to address, that these are economic disparities as well. That we have to focus on work, wages, and wealth. And if we're not addressing those things, everything else will become details. When we're talking about work, it means working with and investing in our institutions of higher education, just like USG, just like Montgomery College, to make sure we're providing pathways of career training and supports for our students. When we're talking about wages, it means we are going to accelerate a $15 minimum wage. The fact that we are not there right now is unconscionable. How many people who lost their jobs due to COVID-19 were living in poverty before COVID-19? I.e. the working poor. People like my mom who didn't get her first job that gave her benefits until I was 14 years old. And we have to address the fact that in this state right now, we have an 8-to-1 racial wealth gap. 8-to-1. And the things that we need to do, things like adjustment or procurement policies, where right now we have a goal of 29%, but the reality is we only hit 14 in this state when it comes to businesses that are MBEs. We have to address work, wages, and wealth to address all the disparities that we see in our society.
You know, about a month after I became Labor Secretary, I had the privilege of going to the 50th anniversary of the March on Washington. The March on Washington was a march for jobs. It was a march for justice. It was AFSCME members and others saying, just because I pick up trash doesn't mean you can treat me like garbage. We are caught up in an inescapable web of mutuality. And what the next governor has to do is not only articulate a vision, but deliver on that vision, get stuff done, because we've been talking about these issues for decades. I've been working on these issues for decades. I settled the 2 largest fair lending cases in the history of the Fair Housing Act, including one case involving so many black and brown homeowners in the Baltimore area who got screwed because of the color of their skin. We have 350,000 uninsured Marylanders here. 25% of COVID deaths were because they were uninsured. They're disproportionately black and brown. I have a plan to make sure 100% of Marylanders have access to quality, affordable health insurance. And in order to do that, we have to say, regardless of your immigration status, you should have health insurance in this state. It's an economic imperative, it's a moral imperative, it's a healthcare imperative. And we need to make sure we're connecting communities of color to the jobs of the future. I used to work in the Labor Department on connecting high school kids who are really fluent with their gadgets and Xbox and things like that, connecting them, for instance, to computer coding jobs. These are jobs that don't require a college degree. This is what we do, jobs and justice. That's what I've done my entire career.
So from 2016 into 2018, I was the CIO, the COO, and the Chief of Staff at our Maryland Department of Health. And in that role, I had the opportunity to work at the intersection of criminal justice and behavioral health. And that was Justice Reinvestment Act for folks who are familiar with that. And working with the judiciary, with the legislature, with the department, we took the number of days of getting people from receiving a court order for mental health services or addiction, substance use disorder services. We took that number from 100 days down to 15 to 20, depending on what category of service you're talking about. So that was access to care for those who were justice involved. I would like to build on that accomplishment by expanding access to counsel for those who are justice involved. We need to bolster the resources available to the public defender's office. We need to make it a level playing field within the court, within the courtroom. And then finally, we do have an unconscionably disproportionate number of black young males who are incarcerated. My first day in office, I will launch a review of all criminals, everyone in state jails not accused of violent crimes, to see if we can't make them eligible for amnesty. Right? Those who have ended up, and then the last thing, why are we seeing this?
We're going to have to ask you to wrap.
We need to restore hope. We need to end the war on drugs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Robin, running for governor. I'll be the first Maryland governor to have actually marched with Dr. King in the March for Jobs and Justice. Tom, I didn't see you there that day. Also, I was appointed by Rosa Parks to be the first general counsel for the National Caucus on the Black Aged. If we give a tax cut to every mother's child every day by cutting the sales tax, that will put more money in their pocket. If they buy a hamburger, newspaper, rotisserie chicken, car, they'll get a rebate. And then they can spend that money on their family. They can do what they want with that money. Yesterday, I won a 4-hour trial in Charles County Circuit Court, where a young black woman was exonerated of all charges because I stood up for her rights, as I have in 40,000 other cases. We need someone with some judicial experience who knows what fairness really means. And every Monday morning, I'm going to have an open house down in Annapolis, so people who don't feel like they're treated fairly or who have ideas to improve our state, they can come and talk to their governor, and we will listen to you and take your views into account, because you are going to be my boss, not the special interests.
Thank you. We're going to make a slight adjustment so that we can get a couple more questions in. The adjustment will be, instead of 90 seconds, 60 seconds, if that's okay for all of the candidates. The next question is, Amazon chose Virginia, Facebook is in DC. Meanwhile, places like here in Montgomery County have lost thousands of high-paying jobs to neighboring jurisdictions since 2007. what would your administration's plans be to bring jobs, particularly high-paying jobs, to Maryland, starting here with Mr. Baker?
Thank you. I want to say a couple of things. One, I like Robin's idea about having the government open for people to come in and to visit them. We did it in Prince George's County. We had Citizen Day, so that's a great idea. The other one is my friend John here talks about, when we have these policies, it should be about what works. And this is an example, and I agree totally, which is why the policies that Nancy Navarro and I put forth have things that have actually happened. And so when we talk about job creation, I came into a county that was actually losing jobs. We were last in the state. We did it by actually investing in ourselves. We used the money where we can use the money we're getting from the federal government to actually incentivize not only businesses to come here, but also to pay higher wages. It's not either or. We actually raised our minimum wage and increased the amount of job creation in Prince George's County. In fact, we went from the last in the state to actually leading the state in job creation 5 years in a row. And we can do that across the state, but you can't do it unless you know how to actually get it done. And that's something that our administration would do.
Thank you.
The most important thing we can do for businesses and the economy in our state is to provide a well-trained, well-educated, highly skilled workforce. Studies show that factor, more than anything else, is important to economic productivity and growth. People matter. The quality of the workforce matters. It really matters to the state, to Maryland and to any other state or jurisdiction. That's why I want to invest in programs and policies that have been tested and proven to increase the supply of highly trained workers that get well paid. I gave you an example of job training. We would launch a statewide public-private partnership with businesses across the state to provide effective job training to every young adult in Maryland who wants to advance. The state would pay for the training, the businesses pay for the internships, the economy gets skilled workers, everybody benefits. We would expand other policies like career academies and high-poverty schools, which have been shown not only to provide high-quality workers, but to increase earnings.
Mr. Barron.
Increase earnings by $2,500 per year 10 years later.
Thank you.
So not only do we have to have Maryland open for business, we need to have Montgomery County open for business. And so we need somebody who's actually led. I have more experience in elected office than every Democratic candidate up here combined. I've led during crisis. We're in a crisis. As we come out of COVID, we need to do things like waive the sales tax for our restaurants here in Montgomery County for the first quarter of next year. We need to have somebody who, when I was president of the National Association of Attorneys General, all the attorneys general in the country, we did the national mortgage foreclosure crisis, kept people in their homes, fought the big banks, got almost $2 billion into Maryland. Why does that experience matter? Because you understand how to use the levers of government. I ran the Joint Sniper Task Force here in Montgomery County. When we had the Beltway snipers, we need criminal justice. We need to keep people safe. Businesses will not come here if we're not safe. We need to have the blueprint passed for our education. One of the things that happened when I was growing up, we had the best school systems in the country, but if we don't have a Democratic elected governor, that's going in the trash can. And the recent Gansler poll showed that a moderate Republican beats a progressive Democrat by almost 20% here in Maryland next year.
Testing? Okay. So I come from a minority-owned small business family, and I've seen growing up, there's often a false notion that what's good for employers must be bad for employees and vice versa. Both can benefit, which is what my plan does. In terms of protecting and investing in our employers, we need more branch banking, especially for women, veteran, LGBTQ, disabled owned entrepreneurs and businesses, making sure that we're making the procurement process more transparent and more accountable. For employees, it's making sure we have protective bargaining rights, preventing at-will contracts, and making sure we have my Maryland Now plan, which again will make sure that more people have disposable income and a reduced cost of living so that people are able to retire in our state and more people and businesses are able to move into our state.
We ultimately have sure that folks have the skills for jobs that are available. There are thousands of open cybersecurity jobs in the DC metro region. Those are good jobs with good salaries, good benefits, but folks don't have the skills they need. So we've got to grow our apprenticeship programs, our programs at community colleges, and our programs at our HBCUs to align with those areas where jobs are growing. Cybersecurity is one, green jobs is another as we move towards renewable energy. We also have to make sure that we invest in infrastructure. Public transportation is part of that, but so is broadband access. For many parts of the state, improved broadband access will be critical to their ability to attract and retain businesses. And then we've got to tackle access to capital for our small businesses. I was in Hagerstown a few weeks ago talking with two African-American women who just opened a new business, a juice bar. And I asked them, how'd you open the business? How'd you get the capital to do it? And what they described was emptying their retirement, borrowing from friends and family, and using credit cards. That's not right. If we had a state bank in Maryland, we could make it much easier for small businesses to access capital.
Mr. Moore, before you start, I'm actually going to switch gears. The question is on education. Prior to the pandemic, there was a teacher shortage. Fewer people were interested in going into the field. Meanwhile, those who are in the field are increasingly expressing a desire to leave. According to a Brookings study, 30% of teachers earlier this year reported a probability of leaving the profession, up from 24% last year. The blueprint addresses this, but the situation has worsened since the pandemic. What is your plan to retain and attract teachers? Is there more to be done?
I come from a long line of preachers and teachers. That's been my family background. And I was actually just speaking with my aunt, who's a teacher over in Accokeek in Prince George's County, and she was telling me that one of the neighboring schools, they had just lost 10 teachers in 2 weeks. This teacher shortage is real, and what we're watching with this teacher attrition, it is real. And so I was very proud to work with a whole series of Maryland state legislatures on the blueprint, and I can tell you that in our administration, in the Moore-Miller administration, we're going to prioritize operationalizing the blueprint to include things like increasing teacher pay, to include things like making sure we're focusing on early childhood and having a universal early childhood and pre-K program. But it's also about how are we increasing the teacher conditions and focusing on the teacher experience. Making sure that our teachers are actually teaching in buildings and classrooms that respect the occupation. Making sure that we have career pathways for our teachers. Making sure that we can work with our institutions of higher education and our HBCUs to increase the pipeline of teachers of color that we have inside of our classroom. We have to make sure we are centering this on the teacher experience.
Ms. Moore, thank you.
Yeah. Pre-pandemic, 42% of educators were leaving within the first 5 years. 50% of our educators are imported from other states. We have a serious problem, exacerbated, as you know, by the pandemic. In response to an earlier question, I said one of the things I would do with the surplus is provide immediate help for teachers and other educators to address this issue. We absolutely have to understand the need to build the pipeline. That's why we do have to work with HBCUs. That's why we have to make sure that we look at our own workforce now. I spoke to someone recently in Pennsylvania. They're doing a program where they're taking people who are already employed in the school system and they're helping them upskill. And then becoming para-educators, helping para-educators become educators, building that pipeline from within. That's a remarkable set of opportunities for us moving forward. We have to do all of the above. And the thing about the blueprint, the thing about transportation, the thing about all the issues we're talking about is these are going to require a governor who can exercise sustained executive leadership. It's an all of the above strategy. And that's the question you got to look at. Who can actually get it done? That's the key. And that's what I've done my entire career, getting stuff done.
So if we want both better careers for teachers and better education for students, the blueprint isn't going to deliver it. We need to look to a different place. We need to look at where education in Maryland and America is working, and that's higher education, our colleges and universities. And what's the model there? The model there is choice, right? Choice ends up providing accountability for performance, and choice ends up for teachers, providing more opportunities for higher pay and for more opportunity early in the career to start up for young educators to launch their own schools, recruit their own students, and embark on the career that they want to embark on without having to start out as substitute teachers, without having to be subject to seniority rules for pay and opportunities. So let's adopt in Maryland the same model that works at the university level, school choice. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, Robin here. There are a lot of people who are concerned about teachers now. Where were they over the last year when our schools were closed down, when Maryland had the highest number of not in-person students in the entire nation? Where were these people then? Our families were hurt by closing our schools. Remember when we wanted to level the curve for 15 days? Our schools should have been open. And there's no excuse for making our little children wear masks 8 hours a day in class so that at the end of the day their masks are filled with bacteria. We need to open up the process. The legislature's passage of the digital download tax gave Maryland a bad name for high-tech jobs. 3 weeks after that, Apple located its billion-dollar campus in Raleigh, North Carolina, with 3,000 jobs averaging $185,000 each. We need to make Maryland business-friendly, then we can pay for our schools easily.
Thank you. That concludes. I was given a time of 9:45, and so I want to thank each of the candidates for staying on their time, the time that was allotted to them. I also want to thank everyone who's here. If we could give our candidates a round of applause for their thoughtful answers to all of the questions. Thank you again for inviting me.
Could the candidates please stay here? Could the candidates please stay up here for a moment? We want to get a couple of pictures. If you could all please stay. Before everybody leaves, I'd just like to make a couple of closing remarks. I want to thank everybody. I think the candidates have been terrific. They gave us a lot to think about. Ovetta, where are you? Thank you very much. Those were incredible questions, and you enabled us to learn so much. I'd also like to thank the sponsors again and everybody for coming. Wish everybody a happy new year. Safe and healthy. Next year will be very different when we come back. Don't forget to go out and invest, spend your time working for candidates, and vote. Thank you very much.